Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with that slow road to recovery in Maui.
Just all my childhood memories gone, and just pray for everyone to come together and come back as a, become strong together and work as together, get our lahaina back as lahaina.
With the official number of dead now over 100, officials are coming under more and more scrutiny on how they handled things. And California is preparing for what could be the first tropical storm to make landfall here in more than 80 years. So why is this happening now? Plus, tax charges have been dismissed against the president's son, Hunter Biden, but a criminal investigation could be far from over. And in Mississippi, 2 white men allegedly chased a black FedEx driver and fired at least 5 shots into his van. They were charged with attempted murder, but today, a mistrial was declared in that case.
They heard a couple of shots while he was talking to his manager, and they told him, just come on back to the FedEx yard.
And we'll tell you why the south side of the moon is the focus of a new space race.
I don't want China to get to the South Pole first with humans and then say, this is ours, stay out.
Good evening, and we start tonight in Hawaii, where the death toll is now 111 people after those deadly Maui fires. But even more shocking, 9 days later, and there still could be more than 1,000 people missing. So the number of dead is expected to rise dramatically, with search crews on the ground finding more and more bodies every single day.
We're just finding, well, there was a couple over there by the camp, and I saw it a couple times I walked by, and it looked like a burned carpet, you know, a roll of burned carpet. There's nothing left.
And all of this happening as some of the survivors are finally seeing their homes for the first time since they escaped the fire.
Is this the first time you're seeing this?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to take in, you know, just seeing all this devastation. I don't know what to think. We grew up here. This is home to a lot of us.
And tensions are also rising for those who live there, trying to nail down exactly what caused these fires. Hawaii Electric, the utility company that provides power to 95% of the state, is under heavy scrutiny, as many with 4 lawsuits currently filed against it, and lawyers saying that their decision to put off upgrading the grid caused this tragedy. All while Hawaii's Attorney General is now asking a third-party organization to review the response to the fires, which led to some rather tense moments during yesterday's press conference, including questions like this.
Do you regret not sounding the sirens?
I do not. And the reason why... and
so many people said they could have been saved if they had time to escape. Had a siren gone off, they would have known that there was a crisis emerging. And as we know, so many bodies were found in the ground as the flames.
Do you want him to give you the answer? Or
I do, but I want to get it out there.
Let him finish his answer.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of people.
Well, you're talking and you're not letting him talk. If you want to talk, come up here.
And NBC's Tom Yamas joins us now from Maui. Tom, I've seen you pushing for answers to the questions that so many people have about this fire, how it started, the response to it. This feels a lot like deja vu of California's Camp Fire, where there were signs that it was caused by power lines, and yet people had to wait months for a cause to be declared. This time, Hawaiian Electric is at the center of all this, right? What's the latest with what's going on there?
Yeah, Gadi, and I don't think you're making a mistake comparing it to the Paradise Fire and what happened in California, just because it's going to take a long time. Already you have 4 lawsuits being filed against Hawaiian Electric. Hawaiian Electric, for their part, has said they don't comment on pending litigation. They also want the investigation to play out, and right now we still do not know the cause of this fire. Yes, we have seen those videos both at this wildfire and at the Kula wildfire, where it appears that lines are snapping, power lines are snapping, and then shortly thereafter a brush fire begins. winds. That's going to all be part of the investigation. And we know now today, this is new reporting, that the Attorney General here in Hawaii is now going to ask an independent investigator to join her team as they investigate the causes of this. But there's a lot of pressure on Hawaiian Electric right now. The people all throughout Maui, especially here in West Maui, they want answers. They want to know also why, if Hawaiian Electric did a study in 2019 that showed they had to trim some of the vegetation around these power poles. They even used a phrase in their study saying that this could lead to wildfires if it's not cleaned up. Why they didn't clean it up? This was 2019. We're talking about 4 years ago, and now we're in this situation, and you have this. Now, did the power lines cause this? We don't know yet, but if they did, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
And Tom, you spoke to two brothers and their mom today who lost their dad, the father in that family. Can you talk to us about what you're hearing from families, from survivors, and how recovery efforts are going right now?
Yeah, his name was Alfredo Gallinado. He was identified. He's part of that 110. And again, that number is probably going to grow every day. According to his sons, from what they understand, he tried to get out. The traffic was just too bad. He's elderly. He's older than 70 years old. He could not walk out. The smoke overcame him at some point, and he lost his life. I spent part of the morning with his two sons, John and Joshua, and they shared stories of their dad, telling me how they had a great trip to Las Vegas recently, how much his dad loved going to Las Vegas. He loved being part of this community. They're a Filipino family, but they've been here for 30 years. They raised their family here in Lahaina, and these brothers are worried. They're worried about what's going to happen to their town, how it's going to change, what's going to happen to their home. All of this as they're now unfortunately making funeral arrangements.
Wow, worried about others while they're suffering their own loss. Tom Yamas, thanks so much.
Yeah.
And getting supplies and aid to survivors is one of the many challenges on Maui right now. Yesterday, we spoke to one community organizer who says a lot of people don't even have enough water.
There's no water, clean water. So we've been trying to haul 300-gallon totes of water out there, just doing anything we can to make it a little easier on the people on the other side.
And joining us now is Tiare Lawrence. She's a community organizer in Lahaina who's been passing out food and supplies to people in need. Thank you so much for joining us. There is a whole lot of controversy about the water supply in Lahaina. Can you tell us about how you think this played into the fires?
Well, in terms of the quality of the water, obviously it's tainted, right? There's a lot of concern about the water being, just can't use it. But there's also, land speculation was an issue over the last few days, but now we're also being hit with a water grab. You have a private landowner that owns all the land surrounding Lahaina town who has mismanaged that land for well over 2 decades since the closure of sugar, and is now trying to take the water under the emergency proclamation, which has a lot of Native Hawaiians very furious right now, both at that company and at the governor.
And so it's not just the water issues that are happening right now. Both those water issues you were just talking about, there were water issues as this crisis was unfolding, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, access to water was an issue. And, they like to point fingers at the restoration of our streams that Native Hawaiians have fought for decades. But the reality is they extract our resources and send it to the hotels and the pools and the gentleman real estate and the million-dollar homes. Had we been more responsible with our water resources in the first place, we would have had more than enough water to fight this fire. But that is our reality here in Lahaina town.
We're also learning more about what could have caused and spread these fires. What's it like hearing all this, seeing what you've seen firsthand, and also seeing what people are having to go through in this aftermath?
It's frustrating, the mismanagement of these lands surrounding our town being held in the hands of a private landowner who doesn't want to pursue agriculture. These are agriculturally zoned lands. They have never once tried to pursue agriculture. They have been waiting for decades for the zoning to change so that they can build more gentleman estates. And so that's our reality. But the situation has been heartbreaking. Our community is grieving. We're still looking for our loved ones. And then you have this situation with land speculation and water speculation when we haven't even had the time to process this. And my goal, or my hope, is that the community will have a seat at the table on moving forward and what our town looks like.
Looking at the area around, you're from there, and I'm wondering, have you seen a change in like the grasses around Lahaina? I've been reading a lot about invasive grass species that are not something that we're normally seen in that part of Maui, and yet that was fuel for this fire.
Absolutely. In ancient Hawaii, or prior to Kingdom, Lahaina was known for being the breadbasket of the Pacific. We were known for our breadfruit groves. It's called Malu Ulu Olele. And then when sugar plantations came in, you know, obviously they took the water for their own personal use. But since the closure of sugar, a lot of these lands have turned into an arid desert. And that's because of poor land management. And that's our reality.
Tiara Lawrence, thanks so very much for that perspective. It's one that we will not forget.
Thank you so much.
And a lot of questions have been raised about the efficiency of Maui's EMS chief. He was the same guy you saw earlier answering questions about the failure of the siren system. From our affiliate in Honolulu, reporter Allison Blair has uncovered exclusive details about where he was when those fires started. Take a look.
After a week of being noticeably absent from all press conferences, the head of Maui County's Emergency Management Agency addressed the media for the first time Tuesday. During the question and answer period, he said this brief statement about his whereabouts the night Lahaina burned.
I was not there that night. I was in Oahu attending a conference.
According to documents obtained by H&N Investigates, Ndaya was in Waikiki at the Alohalani Resort attending what was scheduled to be a 3-day FEMA disaster preparedness seminar called the Pacific Partnership Meeting. A receipt from the hotel shows Ndaya checked in last Monday, a day before the fire started. That same receipt lists a departure date of Wednesday, August 9th, the morning after flames reduced Lahaina town to ash. What we're still trying to confirm is exactly what time Ndaya left Oahu and returned to Maui, along with details about how much the administrator knew during the early stages of disaster response. But because each press organization is limited to just one question, we were unable to get those answers. According to the Pacific Partnership agenda, the FEMA conference began Tuesday morning at 7:30 a.m. after fires in Kula and Lahaina sparked. Officials from other counties confirmed the seminar went on as scheduled that day. According to Tuesday's agenda, the day wrapped up with a networking reception at the hotel's Longboard Club from 5 to 7 that evening. At the same time, people were running for their lives, trying to escape flames that engulfed the town.
Right now, we're still trying to confirm if Ndaya attended the conference alone or if other emergency officials from his office were with him. We're also trying to track down who was there from the state's emergency management office. Last night, I submitted a public information request to FEMA asking for a complete list of attendees. I also sent that same request to Maui County and the state emergency management office. I have yet to get a response from anyone. Allison Blair, Hawaii News Now.
And tonight, Southern California is bracing for a possible hurricane this weekend. Yeah, you heard us right. A hurricane in California. Hurricane Hilary is brewing out near Mexico. But look at this. This is expected to take a path right towards Los Angeles, which means massive amounts of rain next week. And we know where there's lots of rain, there's a lot of flash flooding. And this is all extremely rare. If Hilary keeps on its track and fingers crossed it weakens, it'll be the first time in 84 years that a tropical storm makes landfall in California. So why is this happening? Well, it could be in large part because of El Nino. And NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now. Bill, first off, this is going to hit Mexico as a full hurricane. And second, what happens if it keeps on its track right now to us here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I didn't have this one, Gadi, on my crazy bingo card for weather and disasters. This is going to be a significant historical weather event that most of us alive have never seen before. Some people probably in Southern California remember Hurricane Kathleen in 1976, and that's what this storm will be compared to. So, first thing first, it's a large storm. I'm not even talking how strong it is. It's just big. And so that means by the time it gets northwards, it's not just going to hit a narrow area. There'll be widespread widespread problem. So even our friends in Arizona have to watch this, Nevada, maybe even as far north as Idaho and Oregon, dealing with what's left of a tropical system. I mean, that's pretty rare. It is possibly going to become a major hurricane tonight. Then the Hurricane Center has it going up to a Category 4 tomorrow. And then it will begin, by the time we get to like Sunday morning, it's moving over cooler waters, and that's when the weakening trend should continue. The Hurricane Center has it literally just right along the Baja, so it may make landfall. It may not. It may be right along the coast. That's only going to be for the record books. It's really not going to make much of a difference because the strong winds around the center will be over the Baja, so you have to worry about them, too, this weekend. And then as we go through Sunday afternoon and evening, that's when it gets closest to San Diego, and by the time we get through early Monday morning, closest to Los Angeles. And, of course, both areas are in that cone of uncertainty. How certain are we it's going to Southern California? All of our computer models are for 4 days, 3 days away. This is a pretty narrow section here, so excellent agreement. Now, the worst case scenario for Southern California is a storm just off the coast. That brings the stronger east wind into areas here in the mountains and through all the valleys, almost like we're just, almost like a fall type scenario where we're worried about the wildfires. So that is going to be the case. Here is the rainfall prediction. So we're going to get the strong gusty winds, highest at the mountains. We're not sure exactly how strong in the cities. And then the rainfall Sunday morning begins heavy in San Diego, gets worse during the day on Sunday. Los Angeles, 10 p.m. Sunday, torrential rain possible. That's when you'll get your strongest wind gusts, too. And that's, Gadi, when we'll have the worst of our flash flooding.
Rain in the month of the year that you usually see almost like no rain here in Southern California.
Watches. I mean, flood watches in areas that get like zero rainfall this time of year.
And Bill, as Maui is recovering, we're hearing that they may need to brace for some heavy rain as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we still have to worry about other systems out there in the Pacific, too. So we have two storms. One is Greg. That is far to the south of Hawaii. That's not an issue whatsoever. And now we have a dying system. We call it post-tropical, Fernanda. That is going to be heading for the Hawaiian Islands. Now, it's not going to regenerate, but there is a lot of tropical moisture with it. And a lot of our computer models are saying that the heaviest rainfall will be falling on the east side of the islands and not so much where we had the fires. That's the typical drier sides. And so we could see the heaviest rain Sunday to Tuesday. This does not look to be a big problem as far as flash flooding or anything. Maybe it'll actually help with some of the, firefighting efforts, especially if we can get some of that moisture in those areas that have been especially dry. So I'm not overly worried about that. We'll deal with that, as we go into the beginning of next week. But, Gadi, all eyes are on Hilary. I mean, this is going to be quite an event, life-threatening and flash flooding that will likely do millions of dollars of damage, hopefully not billions, but it's possible.
Bill Cairns will be checking back with you a lot next week. Thanks so much. And up next, charges were dropped tonight against Hunter Biden. But is that just a technicality, or is this an end to a federal investigation into the president's son? We are going to answer that coming up next. So stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. In Australia, the founder of the Hillsong Church was acquitted of a charge that he covered up for his father's child sex crimes. The court actually ruled that he followed the wishes of one of the victims by not reporting those crimes. Now, the global megachurch operates in 30 countries, including the United States. And Tennessee State Representative Justin Jones was sworn back into the state legislature. He was one of the lawmakers expelled from his post after protesting gun violence on the chamber floor back in April. Here's some of what he had to say.
The people of District 52 sent me back here because they know that we need fighters in this body. We need people who will stand up when they say sit down, people who are willing to find a way to get in the way and get in good trouble when it's the lives of our children at stake.
And the head coach of the U.S. women's national soccer team is stepping down, all coming a week after the U.S. was knocked out of the World Cup, the team's earliest send home ever. He took over in 2019 and managed the team through 2 major international tournaments, but came up short of championships each time. And if you're in Minnesota, you might want to stay inside, at least for the next 24 hours. There is dangerous smoke from Canadian wildfires expected to blanket the entire state. It is the 10th time this summer that state meteorologists have issued a red air quality alert. And if you're looking to buy a house, rough news. Mortgage rates are now the highest they've been in 20 years. The average 30-year rate is 7.09. It's not as bad as 1981 when the rate hit a whopping 18%, but still very, very painful. And we've got some breaking news on Hunter Biden tonight. The judge has formally dismissed the tax charges against the president's son, but that does not mean the threat of criminal charges is gone or the investigation is over, especially not after we saw that plea deal between Hunter Biden and federal prosecutors implode recently. Instead, it's widely seen as a technicality, which leaves the special counsel free to file those same charges or even more charges in another district, like here in California, where Hunter Biden lived, or in Washington, D.C. And an American was just arrested in Moscow on espionage charges. Matt Bradley has those details.
Yeah, so this is another case of an American in Russia who's being taken into custody. And we've seen a lot of that over the past year and a half, ever since Vladimir Putin invaded neighboring Ukraine. There's been a lot of tension building up over these prisoners that Russia seems to be almost accumulating. But this case is a little bit different. This man is named Gene Spector. Gene, as in Yevgeny. He was born and raised in Russia, and then he moved later to the United States. And that's when he got naturalized as an American citizen. So after that, he moved back to Russia. He started going into business, and he actually pled guilty. He was convicted of bribing a former deputy, or arranging a bribe for a former deputy prime minister of Russia. So he was in jail when this was issued today. So this is not something that's necessarily brand new. He's in prison already, and that's why Gene Spector might not enjoy, even though he's being arrested for espionage, and all of this is according to state news agency TASS, he might not enjoy the same attention from the United States officials because he's already a convicted and serving felon.
Matt Bradley, thanks so much. In Mississippi, a judge declared a mistrial today in the case of a white father and son accused of chasing and shooting at a black FedEx driver back in January of 2022. Brandon Case and his father, Gregory, were charged with attempted first-degree murder. Now, the defense asked for a mistrial after it was revealed that a local police department withheld evidence, a videotaped statement that the police had taken from the FedEx driver. NBC's Jesse Kirsch has more. Jesse, first, bring us up to the specifics on this case. What was in this videotaped interview?
Yeah, so the judge even making a point, Gadi, in court of saying that he had not reviewed this videotape statement. So we don't have many details about it, but as you mentioned, this came from the alleged victim in this incident, and the very fact that this statement existed and had not been shared with the prosecution and the defense was enough for the judge to declare a mistrial on this.
And what did the judge say? I mean, this, I hate to say it, but this seems like 101. If there's something that has to do with the victim of the case, giving a sworn or an interview that is videotaped to police, like that gets turned over as evidence. What did the judge say when they all realized that that wasn't the case here?
Yeah, so this unfolded yesterday in court where the police detective from the local police department admitted under oath that he had withheld this evidence. Then fast forward to today, and in court, the judge ruled on this motion from the defense asking for a mistrial. He granted that request for a mistrial, and the mother of the alleged victim could be heard having an outburst, clearly frustrated and storming out of the courtroom, being escorted by law enforcement out of the courtroom as after that outburst unfolded. And the judge made a point of saying that in 17 years he had not seen this. This is something that he's not happy about. But also, I spoke with one of our legal analysts earlier, and Danny Savalas, one of our legal analysts, made a point to me, Gadi, that this does happen. This is not completely unheard of. But as you mentioned, this is pretty basic legal work on the part of the prosecution and the law enforcement investigators that they work with. And clearly, they were not in tandem on this.
So what's next? I mean, does this go back to square one?
Yeah, mistrial. That does not mean that there is no possibility of another trial. This is something that obviously could weigh heavily on the defense, just in terms of having to pay your lawyers more, right? The defendants having to pay their lawyers more as opposed to the state, the prosecution, which in theory has deeper pockets. They can try this case again. At this point, there's no indication that prosecutors do not plan to refile or do not plan to retry this case. So waiting to be seen. But as you and I know, Gadi, we both have covered legal proceedings over the years. This takes time. The wheels of justice grind slowly. And so this is not something that is going to happen overnight. So we're just going to have to wait and see how things play out. Meanwhile, an attorney for the alleged victim, Mr. Gibson, in this case, is calling for a Department of Justice investigation into the local police department over this and other allegations of wrongdoing, essentially, on the part of that department throughout the proceedings that have unfolded after this incident.
Jesse Kirsch, thanks so much. And coming up, L.A. is trying to get mob robberies under control. We've got some details on how the city is fighting crime. But first, you got to see this. Mountain lion kitties. They are cougar kittens in California. They were born on the Southern California mountains at the beginning of the summer. And those kitties are less than a month old in this video that you're looking at right there. They are just perfect. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. And here are the headlines we're following tonight here on the West Coast. The FBI has arrested 9 cops in the Bay Area accused of criminal misconduct. Now, this comes after an 18-month investigation into police departments in the California cities of Antioch and Pittsburgh. The indictments point to a wide range of alleged crimes, from civil rights violations to wire fraud to claims of interfering with an ongoing homicide investigation. And at least one officer is being accused of bragging that his police canine bit 28 people. The officers have not yet entered a plea. And the mayor of Los Angeles has put together a task force to take on the latest string of smash and grab robberies.
These are not victimless crimes, especially in the case where Angelenos are attacked through force or fear. No Angeleno should feel like it is not safe to go shopping in Los Angeles. No entrepreneur should feel like it's not safe to open a business in Los Angeles. So to Angelenos, our message is clear. Those who commit these crimes will be caught.
And you are looking at a mob of more than 30 robbers ransacking a Nordstrom over the weekend, getting away with more than $100,000 in luxury merchandise. Earlier this month, another mob hit a store in Glendale, stealing more than $300,000 in goods. And the governor of Arizona wants to extradite doomsday mom, Lori Vallow Daybell. She is under 2 indictments there right now. And prosecutors say Vallow conspired to murder her 4th husband and also planned to kill her niece's ex-husband. Last month, Vallow was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for murdering her children. And thousands of miles from the southern border, New York City is struggling to handle the migrant crisis. More than 100,000 migrants have arrived in New York since last spring, according to Mayor Eric Adams, with almost 60,000 of them still in the city's shelter system. And now, in some places, apparently the crisis might be forcing restaurants to close down. Danny Myers, the guy behind Shake Shack, has announced he is closing 2 of his restaurants at the end of the month. And those restaurants are located in the same hotel that also has become a migrant shelter. Joining us now is NBC's Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, can you walk us through what a huge influx of people seeking asylum has to do with businesses closing?
Well, Gadi, this is something that's been ongoing now for several months. But as you mentioned, Danny Meyer, well-known restaurateur, these 2 high-end restaurants that were in the lobby of the Redbury Hotel, I believe in Gramercy, here in New York. They're going to have to close now, the restaurant says, because in a statement saying that while the restaurants respect and admire the decision of the hotel to house these migrants, it doesn't make it for a financially viable option for that business because it depends on foot traffic and they won't have access to certain parts of the hotel. And we spoke with another jeweler, Gadi, at a separate hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel. Actually, the video you're looking at right now was taken several weeks ago when it was a group of migrants there on the sidewalk. That hotel housing hundreds of migrants as well at this point. The jeweler that is right next to the lobby there says that his business has been drastically impacted over the last several months. That business is down 50%, that he's had to take away his jewelry from the windows. and there's constant presence of the migrants that he says does not allow for as much foot traffic into his business as he was previously used to. So there are some critics of what Mayor Eric Adams is doing here. There's a protest that happened just last night at a new migrant shelter set to open in Queens. The mayor, though, says that he has no choice, that he needs to house these migrants somewhere because by law, New York City is required to offer temporary housing for anyone who asks for it. And the mayor says he is essentially desperate and asking the federal government for more help. Gadi.
I think we actually have some of what the mayor said a little bit earlier today. Here's a quick listen.
And so when you look at the points that the governor raised, we want to sit down with her team and give them a real accounting so we can continue the partnership that we've done. We're not getting the answers we need from the federal government, and we're constantly playing catch up on those who are coming in, and a large number of them are children with families.
So between the city, the state, and the federal government, where do things stand right now in New York?
Yeah, so, Gadi, you heard two things from Mayor Eric Adams right there. The second part of what he said was blasting the Biden administration for not doing enough. He's been saying that now for several months now. The Biden administration, the White House, for its part, says that it has given more than $100 million in aid to New York City to help with this, although there are still questions about whether they could be doing more. The first thing he said referred to Governor Kathy Hochul, also a Democrat. However, got a lot of attention this week because a lawyer for the governor sent a letter to the city as part of an ongoing court case, essentially calling out the mayor and his administration for, according to the letter, not being proactive enough when it comes to this migrant influx. This all comes down to money, Gadi. The city is hopeful that the state would pick up more of the tab for this. They want, the state to reimburse the city up to 2/3. That has not happened. And if you look at those stats right there, more than 100,000 migrant arrivals since last spring, $58,000 people in shelters, and this is expected to cost city taxpayers some $12 billion by the summer of 2025, a problem with no end in sight here in New York City and in some other major cities across the country, Gadi.
And Gabe, real fast before you go, I know you said a little bit earlier, anybody in New York that asks for shelter by law is entitled to shelter. How does that work when migrants arrive in New York?
Well, that's what's been such a huge issue over the last several months. That is a requirement here in New York. It's meant to help the homeless population. New York has also referred to itself repeatedly as a so-called sanctuary city and has welcomed migrants and immigrants throughout its history. Still, though, it's becoming an issue now with this huge number of migrants that are here. They really just don't have the money to pay for housing and caring for them. Gadi.
Gabe Gutierrez, thanks so much. And you know those floating barriers that Texas Governor Greg Abbott put on the Rio Grande? It turns out it began as an administration idea from Trump back in 2020, and it also appears as most of those buoys are on the Mexico side of the river. NBC's Julia Ainsley has the latest.
Gadi, you've been hearing a lot about this 1,000-foot barrier floating along the Rio Grande River outside of Eagle Pass, Texas, right along the state's border with Mexico, because we've already heard about a lot of migrant injuries and even 2 deaths. 2 migrants were found floating near the side of the buoys earlier this month. Although Texas Governor Greg Abbott says they did not die at the buoys, these migrants simply drifted into them or near them. But going back in time, we're actually able to find out why these buoys are there in the first place. And in fact, we've learned from speaking to Trump's former head of Border Patrol, Rodney Scott, who says in early 2020, he and others at Border Patrol started soliciting contracts to build the exact kind of buoy barrier that you now see in Texas. They had contracts out. They even had special operations teams for Border Patrol test these barriers to try to see if they could get across them. He said we were sold it was a deterrent because it was so hard, even for their special operations unit, to get across these buoys in a pool and in what he called an operational setting. He said they wanted to make them uncomfortable to touch, but to not actually injure migrants. Well, what happened in 2020, of course, COVID-19 exploded. Those contracts came to a halt, and then President Biden was elected, and he vowed to stop border wall construction, and they canceled this project. But someone who's key to this whole orchestration of this plan, Michael Banks, who's working for Rodney Scott at the time, is now Texas Governor Greg Abbott's border czar. He just took that position in January of this year, and since that time, they've built out this floating barrier. And this is coming from the Trump administration straight into the Abbott administration, and it's the exact same model that Rodney Scott and his team approved back in 2020. Now, this isn't just a history lesson and to figure out how we got here. It's also important to know looking forward, because when I talked to former Chief Scott, he said that there's an intentionality here, that Abbott wants to build wall and barriers and wire in any infrastructure he puts along the border to keep migrants out that would be in accordance with a future Trump administration, so that if Trump is reelected or another immigration hardliner takes the White House, they could continue those same projects and make them border wide. It's supposed to be able to fit in so that plans like these could be expanded. So it's an area to watch, especially as these buoys become more controversial. You know, Texas is already in court. The Biden administration has sued over these barriers, saying not only is it inhumane, but also could potentially be in violation of international treaties with Mexico. Mexico is wholeheartedly against it and blames Texas for those 2 migrant deaths. So certainly a controversial measure, but one that got its start with the Trump administration and one that could be reignited with the future Trump administration. Gadi?
NBC's Julia Ainsley, thanks so much. And it looks like COVID might be making another comeback this summer. I know so many of us would love to leave it behind us in the past, but unfortunately, reported cases are once again on the rise. NBC's Ann Thompson has more.
This summer, most Americans left COVID in the past, gathering together once again mask-free. But tonight, signs of a COVID resurgence. Across the country, COVID hospitalizations jumped more than 14% in the most recent week, but far lower than pandemic levels. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel.
What's behind this uptick in COVID that we're seeing?
The main driver of this is a variant that's relatively newer to the scene, EG5. It's easier to give and get, so that makes it kind of easier to pass along.
It's been almost a year since the last COVID booster came out. CDC Director Dr. Mandy Cohen.
The new COVID booster is expected to be approved by the FDA, and then we will make recommendations from the CDC probably by the 2nd or 3rd week of September.
Will it protect against this new strain?
Yes. The booster is tailored to what we are seeing circulating now.
Critics say the federal government is behind once again. People knew there was going to be a COVID resurgence. So why don't we have a booster today? Why do we have to wait until next month?
The way we go about doing our, just like we do with our flu shots, right? We make sure that we're looking at the ways in which the virus changed. They look at and evaluate that. The FDA is doing its work. We likely will see this as an annual COVID shot, just like the flu shot.
Just in time for fall, when we'll also face RSV. Can you take the flu shot, the COVID booster, and the RSV vaccine all at once?
So for flu and COVID, yes. RSV, again, is only available for older adults. That's one where I'd say talk to your doctor about what's right for you.
And Ann Thompson, thanks so much. And up next, fighter jets could be crucial for Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russia. And NBC's Ellison Barber took the ride of a lifetime inside an F-16 to see how big of a role jets could play in the war.
Ready?
All right.
Yes.
All right. I'll send these to you afterwards.
Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. Off the coast of Africa, tragedy in the Atlantic where dozens of migrants are believed to have drowned after a boat capsized off of Cape Verde. The boat left Senegal about a month ago with more than 100 people on board, and so far officials say there are 38 survivors, but at this point they haven't said where the boat was headed or what caused it to capsize. And 10 people are dead after a plane crashed onto a highway in Malaysia. The impact killed all 8 people on board and 2 people on the ground. Officials say the plane had just been cleared to land when it suddenly veered off course and crashed. And now they're looking for the plane's black box in hopes of figuring out what caused that accident. And Russia has fined Google nearly $32,000 for not deleting what it claims to be fake information about the war in Ukraine. Today, a local Moscow court found YouTube, owned by Google, guilty of of not deleting those videos. And a Russian court imposed similar fines on Apple and Wikipedia earlier this year. And China's fertility rate dropped to a record low in 2022. It's an estimated 1.09, which is the lowest of any country with more than 100 million people. This comes as local authorities have been trying to boost the country's declining number of births by providing financial incentives and improved child care. Last year, China's population shrank for the first time in 6 decades. All right, so it might still be just August, but the holidays will be here before we know it. And this year, more than ever, you might want to get a head start on your gift shopping. That's because shipping delays are happening now. They already have experts anticipating price hikes on most goods. And as we speak, there are over 100 ships just sitting in the Panama Canal waiting to get through due to new restrictions limiting the number of ships that can pass. But why? Well, turns out a serious drought there has caused water levels to plummet, sparking concerns over how climate change could impact shipping routes in the future. NBC's Gadi explains.
The Western Hemisphere's most important canal and the lake it sits on need fresh water. A drought affecting Panama's Gatun Lake means less water is available to operate the Panama Canal, forcing administrators to reduce the number of ships passing through.
We are managing water resources and waiting for some rainfall to come.
And why does this matter? With 40% of all U.S. container traffic coming through the canal, any delays will hit American consumers. And if things continue, it could mean pricier holiday presents this year.
You picture everything you can buy in our superstore are on the ships generally, but the cargo that's going to be more restricted is heavy stuff. You have sometimes machinery, sporting goods, home lighting, home equipment, refrigerators, all that kind of stuff.
The new restrictions come after more than 150 ships were already waiting to cross last week, much more than the usual 90 vessels. Those that do cross are required to wait less, and the wait time to get through the locks now could be as long as 3 weeks. It's also prompted some companies to find alternate shipping options, but those could be more expensive.
It'll be more if your container is forced to be unloaded in California, for example, and then railed across the country to the U.S. East Coast. That's where you would have maybe bought it for X dollars, and then it's going to be X plus 30% or X plus 40%.
Anything coming from East Asia could also go through the Suez Canal in Egypt, which would mean a longer voyage. That canal also bringing back memories of another traffic jam 2 years ago.
There's a new plan to free that massive cargo ship wedged in the Suez Canal.
That 6-day jam delaying tens of billions of dollars in goods, and it happened just as supply chains across the globe started straining, leading to a surge in inflation. Although Panama's situation isn't an emergency, things there could get worse before they get better. The canal's meteorology manager saying the high temperatures in the Pacific due to El Niño have increased evaporation in the lake and led to a weaker rainy season. Its administrator telling CNBC global warming could have real ripple effects on shipping and the worldwide economy.
We believe that climate change is going to impose significant increase in costs and transportation costs in general.
Gadi, thanks so much. And for months now, F-16 fighter jets have been at the center of Ukraine's request from Western allies. And recently, our team got a rare look inside one of them. NBC's Ellison Barber has more.
This is an F-16 fighter jet. They've been used by the U.S. Air Force since the late 1970s. They're fast as lightning.
Ready? All right. Yes.
And I had the chance to fly with the best of the best. The Thunderbirds.
It's been 70 years that we've been doing this. We get to demonstrate what it is that fighter pilots across the U.S. do every single day, day in and day out.
These days, F-16s are the jet everyone seems to be talking about.
We should sell them the F-16 jets.
Ukrainian F-16 pilots.
The F-16.
F-16s.
The F-16s.
F-16.
Ukrainian pilots were supposed to begin training on jets like this sometime this month. But there have been problems.
Right. I'll send these to you afterwards.
Major Jeffrey Downey, Simmer, flies F-16s almost every day.
The G-forces that are exerted on your body are immense. You know, you've got the blood rushing from your head to your feet, and you're having to strain to keep the blood up in your head so that you don't pass out.
Simmer is part of the U.S. Air Force's Thunderbirds. In peacetime, they're known for dazzling crowds with the strength, agility, and speed of F-16s. Why are F-16s so esteemed around the globe?
Yeah, so the F-16 is an incredible platform at what it does. It's a multi-role fighter, so it does air-to-air and air-to-ground, suppression of enemy air defenses. It's got it all. Super maneuverable, extreme amount of thrust that it's got, and it really is the backbone of the United States Air Force and our military.
We wanted to see for ourselves, so I suited up.
Applying pressure to the front of the mask.
Got hours of training.
Go. Make that noise.
And crawled in.
Mask up and down. So go ahead and put your mask up.
For the flight of a lifetime. The speed. The seamless turns. It's hard to describe. Ukrainian officials thought they'd have pilots training on F-16 sometime this month, but it has not happened. A spokesperson with Ukraine's Air Force says the first group of pilots will begin training in Denmark. The training might not be complete before summer 2024, according to a U.S. official who spoke to NBC News on the condition of anonymity. They say that's because Ukraine only recently submitted names of pilots who will undergo training, and over half need English training first. The delays have confused and frustrated Ukrainian officials as well as rank-and-file military members who spoke to NBC News privately. But Ukraine still believes those fighter jets are vital for the country's defense. U.S. military analysts agree.
What do you think of these delays? Do they make sense to you, or do you think it's frustrating as well?
Well, I know it's frustrating, but a couple of points here. You have to have English proficiency in order to fly a U.S. aircraft. The radar systems, the missile system, all in English.
So you don't think a possible summer 2024 delay for F-16 training will hamper the counteroffensive?
It is. It's already hampering it.
One thing is for sure. They call these advanced fighter jets for a reason.
Allison Barber joining the 9G Club. Welcome. Up next, the future of everything. The space race is on to get to the lunar South Pole, and it is getting competitive.
I don't want China to get to the South Pole first with humans and then say, this is ours, stay out.
And in tonight's Future of Everything, we are taking a closer look at the new space race, both to the moon and to Mars. And any day now, Russia is going to land their robotic probe, known as Luna 25, on the dark and the freezing side of the moon's south pole, beating the U.S. to an area that could be critical for future missions. NBC's Tom Costello has more from the Kennedy Space Center.
Now orbiting the moon, Luna 25 is Russia's first robotic lunar mission in nearly 50 years. Russia never landed cosmonauts on the moon, but within days, Luna will be the first probe to land on the moon's south side, working to confirm the presence of frozen water, which could one day be used for rocket fuel. The head of Russia's space agency says the moon could be the launching pad to explore distant planets, including Mars.
Russia has just launched a probe to land on the South Pole.
NASA Chief Bill Nelson says that ice is why the U.S. plans to land Artemis astronauts in 2025. But China is also aiming for the pole.
I don't want China to get to the South Pole first with humans and then say, this is ours, stay out.
Is this starting to feel real?
That's real. That's it. It's starting to feel very, very real.
At the Kennedy Space Center, the Artemis II astronauts, the first crew who will orbit the moon since Apollo, have now inspected the Orion spaceship that will take them there next year.
We're all smiles, of course. It's pretty inspiring moment.
NASA's goal, similar to what Russia and China are planning. Ultimately, NASA wants to create an Artemis base camp on the moon and use that to go to Mars.
Tom, I think the space race is really between us and China, and we need to protect the interest of the international community.
Nelson insists the U.S. would never lock out others, but the new space race is accelerating. Tom Costello, NBC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
And we've got some breaking news happening right now out of Hawaii, and it has to do with an emergency manager we've been talking a lot about today. We have now learned that the Maui County EMS Chief, Herman Andaya, has just resigned. He is the one that's been facing a lot of scrutiny about where he was the day the fire started. He's also faced a lot of tough questioning yesterday about the failure of the siren system as those fires raged. We're going to bring you much more as we have it. And before we go, it is time for the best of us. These two brothers were in for quite the surprise at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and NBC's Kathy Park has their story.
Julian and Harrison Ryan share a special bond.
When they're together, what are they like?
Julian just enjoys whatever Harrison is doing at the time.
With Julian, you can often see and feel what he's thinking through his emotions.
He wakes up laughing with a huge smile on his face.
Born with a brain malformation, Julian can't communicate using words, but oftentimes music takes him to another level. And that's where Sing Me a Story comes in. The nonprofit connects the talents of musicians and songwriters with the creativity of children.
We were the fastest cheetahs in the world.
Harrison's imagination took him and his brother on an epic adventure. Their story made its way on stage, but not just any stage. Jazz musicians and members of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra turned their words,
Julian and I were back in the backyard,
into a one-of-a-kind song, and the kids had no idea.
What do you think is going to happen in the next few minutes?
I don't know.
There was almost this overwhelmed look that Harrison had on his face where he just realized, this is my story. This is really happening right now.
And right by his side, his brother taking it all in too.
Even being able to impact just 2 or 3 people in a room, sometimes that's more meaningful than playing a concert in front of thousands of people.
My brother Julian will forever and always be my adventure partner wherever life takes us.
A surprise these brothers will never forget as they look toward the next adventure. Kathy Park, NBC News, Detroit.
A very special audience of 2. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.